All right. Welcome to the first episode of Inside Open Gym. We're all here to discuss the career of Toronto Raptors legend Kyle Lowry through the lens of Open Gym. I'd first like to say thank you to everyone out there. While we're doing this conversation and working here virtually and having these chats, there's a lot of people out there on the front lines risking their lives, working really hard in the healthcare community. We just want to tip our hats and say thank you to those people and allowing us to do these things and keep everybody safe. So we're very grateful. To introduce everyone, my name is Matt Tierney from Raptors.com, and I'm joined by Alvin Williams, also known as Boogie, one of the most iconic players to ever don a Toronto Raptors jersey. Thanks for joining us, Alvin.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, Doug Smith of the Toronto Star, who's been covering the Toronto Raptors since day one. So all the good scoops and stories you've been reading all those years. Doug has joined us. Thanks, Doug.
Pleasure to be here alongside my guy, Alvin.
And last but not least, Randall Urban, a producer of Open Gym, and you'll see him on court surfing on NBA TV Canada, in Africa with Giants of Africa, all over the place. Thanks for joining us here, Randy.
No problem, but I just why does my background look different than Alvin's? Is that a house? What's that like, man? You got a house. That's pretty cool.
Randy, we ended with you, and we'll start with you, actually. Just kind of to brief the public on your role with Open Gym, your background, and your role as a producer of the show, and your experience being part of this docuseries. Kind of talk to everyone and let everybody know your role.
Sure. It started 6 years ago, just after season 2. The show was going to expand, and I was leaving the Score, and I was looking for a different opportunity. And Jeff Landicho came to me, and he had noticed me. He said from various things that I had done covering the team with the Score, just being in the locker room, and one of the things that he thought was cool was just like, I knew my way around the locker room in terms of how to act, which is, I think, a big thing around the players. So he asked if I wanted to get involved in this show, Open Gym, and it was going to be, and I'd seen it obviously on TV for a couple of years, and I said for sure, like right away, it was a no-brainer. And so this is my 6th season. We're at a bit of a halt right now, but it's been great, man. Like it's been a dream come true, because when I was at the Score, I always wanted to work. I loved covering the team, and that was great. I mean, there's some lean years there for a while, as you guys all know, and then some great years too, when Alvin was there, but you never really felt a part of the team when you were covering it the way I was covering it. Now, Doug was there all the time, so he kind of has a different connection than I did. I was there just at some of the games. And, it's changed completely my outlook, having to go from just like being this, sort of reporter to promoting the team and being around the team and being what kind of feels like part of the team in a way, has been just a dream come true. And it's been great, actually.
Switching over to you, Alvin, kind of looking back at Kyle Lowry's first training camp, if we can kind of go back so far, it's kind of went by all in a blur, but it's, there's been, many years now since he joined the Toronto Raptors. And kind of when you see footage of Kyle's first season in Toronto and at training camp together, and then fast forward all the way till, almost a year ago, an NBA champion, what kind of feelings and memories does that bring back to those years prior?
Man, it just brings you back to, you see all the hard work, you see the progression, you see the ups and downs and everything that goes into it. And you can't really game plan on, especially in pro sports, of being a champion, right? It takes a lot of pieces. There's a lot of moving pieces to get to that point, which, we've seen it through Toronto. And, Kyle coming in, first time at his first training camp, someone that was eager, someone that was looking to make a mark, but still with them some uncertainty for him, who he was as a person, how he was going to respond to certain situations. And once again, that's been a lot of Kyle Lowry's early career. But as you fast forward, all of those things was worth it, right? All those things are learning experiences. All of those things shape a person. I think it helped shape the team. Him becoming a leader, the ultimate leader. And the management trusting him, the coaches trusting him, as well as his teammates. I think that's just something that that you couldn't imagine, but now you see the result of it and came to, 2019 championship.
And in terms of first interactions, as Randy had mentioned, Doug, you had been there since day one. You'd seen a lot of Toronto Raptors basketball, good and bad, leading up to before Kyle Lowry joined this franchise. Do you remember your first interaction with him?
Oh, heck yeah. We hated him, and he hated us.
There it is. This is what we want this chat to be. Here we go.
It was in Halifax at training camp. He didn't know what the Raptors were. We didn't know what he was. He was hurt. He was surly. They brought in this assistant coach, a guy named Alvin Williams, who was the Kyle Whisperer. He's going to take Kyle through and grow him up. And
that didn't work. That didn't work at all. I failed miserably.
Ultimately, that kind of worked out. But no, when Kyle got here the first time, it was Jose's team. Kyle had this reputation as a coach killer and just be basically a surly guy. And he was. And he fully admits it to us now. But he grew. He grew as a man. He grew as a basketball player. And you saw last June what the absolute culmination of it. But the first impressions weren't good. And I don't think anybody, him or anybody who was around him, will admit that they were.
And that's an interesting point, first impressions. He's often considered, Kyle, at the early years as being a little bit misunderstood until he found his niche. Why do you think at times he may be misunderstood, and where do you think his growth stands out to you?
I think he just grew up as a man. Having a family was a huge thing. I think he took care of his body, which was another major consideration early in his career, that he got fit, he got in shape, he spent his summers working on himself as opposed to playing a lot of golf. And he sort of grew up as a person. He was, I don't know, misunderstood is the right word, but I think when he first got to Toronto, no one had any idea what he could be, including him. And he had a significant chip on his shoulder because it had basically been run out of Memphis. It certainly didn't work very well in Houston. And this was, I think a lot of people saw, Alvin, you would know, he saw this as his last chance. If he failed in Toronto, he might be done.
Yeah. And Alvin, do you agree that he was kind of misunderstood?
I'm on the lines with Doug, not being misunderstood because of the way Kyle presented himself. But the thing I will think about my first interaction with him at Villanova and him, he was in high school. I didn't realize that you could be so young and an independent thinker, right? He was more of an independent thinker. He had goals. And what attracted me to Kyle after my initial meetings with him was I saw that he had a game plan. Like, he would do things at Villanova that was against the team. Randy Foye and, Jason Frey, they had some great talent, but Kyle marched to his own beat. But he would do things like get up extra early before a team workout and work out with Jameer Nelson at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And then he may be 5 minutes late to a Villanova workout. But it wasn't like he overslept. He wasn't partying. He wasn't being irresponsible from a standpoint because he had a goal. He was trying to get to where he was getting to. And he was an independent thinker from that. It's not many 17-year-old people are going to wake up before their own workouts. You hear Kobe Bryant stories like that, but Kyle was doing things like that. When he tore his ACL, he was such a pain throughout practice that they had to let him practice so he could, stay out of their hair. And he didn't really do much rehab. And he just came back months after ACL and helped that team go to, I think, the Elite Eight or something like that his freshman year. So he's that type of dude that was so stubborn, but he had a way of thinking that it wasn't aligned with the way we were brought up and things like that. So the Kyle Lowry that you see now has a lot of element, but he learned how to use it to make sure everyone around was more comfortable and everyone else could benefit from it.
And Randy, with Open Gym, the people kind of behind the scenes at all the events, all the off-court functions and different things that you guys have filmed and given such great footage to the fans over the years. Your first interaction with Kyle, was it the same as Doug's and kind of like he doesn't like you guys and you were kind of a little bit worried about what he was going to give you guys?
The first interaction was when I was with the score. So I was just kind of a reporter too. We were, you kind of huddle around the player after a game, and it wasn't, just like Doug said, it wasn't this, great love fest. But for Open Gym, the great thing about Kyle and DeMar, which, at that time, those guys were the stars. And when I first started, they were kind of already, becoming this great duo, was that they bought in, right? So that makes our job so much easier when the two best players on the team are like, yeah, this is cool. We want to do this. So our interactions with Kyle have been always great. He's always been welcoming to his house. You saw in that episode, we are always there when he had the guys over in Philly, or we're there when he's doing the holiday assist, or all these things that he does that he's allowing us to be a part of that. And I think you saw the kind of relevance of that this past week with the Jordan doc, how that in the future could be just this like great gold mine, and it's great now, but, and Kyle, to his credit, he was kind of the first, him and DeMar are kind of the first guys that just really like let us in, So my interaction in that respect has been great. Kyle's like, just to piggyback on what you guys were saying, he's a point guard and he's not a tall point guard. So they have to see the game differently, right? So he just, the way he operates has been like that from the beginning, Yeah. So for him to come and become this man and to be this welcoming guy, and he doesn't do it like everybody you talk to says Kyle's the best teammate, right? But nobody that, if you just watch some of the certain things, or you wouldn't know that, Yeah. So we're allowed to show that part of it, and it's not put on. It's not anything that is contrived, or he's like, oh, I want people to see me do this. It's like, this is what Kyle is. He's a taker on the court, and he had to be that way to get to where he is. But this guy gives, man. He gives, and he gives selflessly.
I've been to a lot of those shoots and been behind the scenes and seen him in all types of settings. And he definitely is, if you could say it, it's weird because he's an authentic guy, but you do see a different side of him that maybe a lot of people don't get to see. I've witnessed that. He is a genuine person. And, I think Open Gym does a great job capturing that and then letting everyone else know that when sometimes that type of information and footage isn't really, public knowledge to a lot of players and a lot of athletes in professional sports. I mean, so we've got everyone's first impressions of Kyle Lowry,
real quick,
bad and otherwise.
Hey, Matt, real quick.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with like Kyle and a lot of athletes, right? When you're dealing with them, and sometimes it's authority, right? And when you get to a college coach and they promise you everything, right? They promise you everything in high school is recruiting. And then as soon as you step foot on campus, it's a whole nother story. So as an athlete and as a young person, that takes you back a little bit. So now the trust factor, and you put a shield up. And then you start, if you're someone like a Kyle, you start, I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to start doing, and it's the same thing in the NBA. NBA is just another piece of NCAA when you deal with authority and you deal with things that are being told to you. And then in Memphis, you see something where he thought it was going to be his spot after Damon Stoudemire left, and Mike Conley gets drafted. And then Houston with Dragic that's playing in Miami. That's who was always that piece. So Kyle could never really like grasp the fact that there's something that was told to him that wasn't the truth. And then that brings that part of the North Philly out, the immaturity out, the lack of understanding. So, like in Kyle's defense to that point, he always thought he was going to be somewhere where he was told he was going to be something more than he actually was initially.
I like that. And we'll actually get a little bit deeper into that topic, like that position battle, that point guard battle, early in Kyle's career and how he progressed through that. But first, I just want to toss it over to a one-on-one interview with our Matt Devlin and head coach Nick Nurse and figure out, his thoughts on Kyle Lowry, obviously his first impressions going from assistant coach to head coach and much more. So tee it up to them.
Nick, first of all, thanks for taking the time to join us. I want to talk about the evolution of your relationship with Kyle Lowry from the very beginning when you were hired as an assistant coach to now over the last 2 seasons as the head coach.
Well, it's really remarkable, Matty, when you look back 7 years now. When I first got here, he wasn't even really the full-time starter yet. So we were still in a situation of figuring out, he was figuring out where he fit into the NBA. Obviously, the position was there for him to start the year, and he started. And then the Rudy Gay trade, I think, cleared things up a little bit for him. It kind of made him not necessarily the primary guy because DeMar was that, but he was certainly the next guy, the secondary behind him. And I think that kind of cleaned up his leadership role a little bit. And then we had that fantastic year. We won 48 games that first year. Went to the playoffs, and he's been clicking off those all-star appearances and improving his game year in, year out. And then, you fast forward to last year's title run, and he was unbelievable. He just took himself to another level, producing in those moments, and had such a huge, huge game. And in Game 6, the game we sealed it, and I think that took him to another stratosphere too. So you're looking at after all that, a 6-time All-Star, an NBA champion, an Olympic gold medal winner. And I think when I first got here 7 years ago, nobody maybe would have foresaw all that hitting his resume in the next 7 years. So what an accomplishment. What it continues to get better and accomplish many things.
It's interesting because you watch him on a nightly basis. And as you well know, there's always a bond between a head coach and a point guard. I think most people think, right, that's an extension of you on the court. And you don't always get that bond, but there certainly appears to be a mutual level of respect and understanding with two guys that have high basketball IQs with you and Kyle. Can you just speak to that aspect of it? Because it's so important, obviously, that you're both seeing things, and it appears from where I sit, there's a lot of give and take within that relationship because he's out there on the court and you're obviously seeing all 10.
Yeah, I think, Matty, first of all, as an organization or as a ball club, we're really fortunate that exists. I think as a coach, you really want a leader out on the floor to take command at certain times of the game and provide feedback. I always said that. I mean, I never played at a super high level, but I always felt that being on the court, you saw different things than the people on the sidelines saw. So you need somebody that can read that stuff and see it a little differently, provide some feedback, take some suggestions. Don't take some. It is like you said, it's some give and take, and I lean on him and he leans on me every now and then, and we just work it out together. And I think you're right. We just both have the common goal of trying to win the basketball game and try to figure it out the best we can. And it's a process once the ball goes up over those 48 minutes.
The thing that I always admire the most in watching Kyle Lowry is his compete and his feel for the game itself. When the ball goes up that it's 48 minutes of all out, but yet there is a feel, and you've been around basketball a long time. You've coached it at many levels. You did play pro. You played Division I basketball. Sometimes it's innate. Sometimes it's something that a player just has. Sometimes it's learned. But yet he has a sense, and he understands that he can change the trajectory of a game, and that may be through taking a charge or making a big transition three. That compete and that feel, where does that come from, do you think, within Kyle Lowry?
Well, I think first of all, Matty, it comes from just in who he is, right? He's a fighter first of all and a competitor, right? When he goes up there, he knows that winning the game is what it's all about, and he gets his motor revved up to figure out how he can impact that, and he does it 100 ways. He does it with scoring, he does it with defense, he does it with taking charges, loose balls, etc. I just think that it comes from who he is as a competitive guy, and he does study the game, Matty. He's played a lot of years now. I'm sure he played a lot growing up and learned a lot just playing with older guys and watching lots of games and all those kind of things. So it's helped his IQ level. He's not afraid to try some new things here and there as well. He'll roll with some of the crazy ideas we throw out there, and then we'll analyze them, and see what we did, what we liked, and what we didn't, and go from there. But two things, Maddie. One, I've never seen anybody play harder. I really haven't. I just think that we are blessed to sit there courtside and watch that level of an athlete play at that level of intensity night after night. And then the other thing is he can, in a flurry in a game, a 3 or 4 minute stretch, he can make like 5 plays that maybe none of them will show up on the box score that just totally change the momentum of the game in our favor. And I think that's really, really something to watch too.
Yeah, there's no question about that. You bring up an excellent point. I don't know how many fans realize how much of a fan of the game he is. And if there's somebody that is, on the bus or late at night that's got his phone and is watching different games around the league, it's Kyle Lowry. When you look at you coming in and that transition, when you sat down and talked about your offense, was Kyle, because of the attributes that he brings, one of those factors where you said, okay, here are some different sets and things that we're going to do that are going to allow you from an offensive standpoint? Because as much as we always talk about you and your offense, you and I both know, because we've talked about it so many times, it really starts with the defense. But when you design and the evolution of your offense and you think about Kyle Lowry, how much of that was a piece to that?
Well, I think a couple things, Maddie. One is he was a decent shooter. He's gone up to being a really good 3-point shooter, and we needed to increase the volume of those attempts. And I think his game has grown, where he can go equally right and left well now, and he goes to the rim hard, which we that's the main thing. I think he's driven the ball harder recently. We'll try to get his attempts up to 10 threes a game, which is a lot. We pretty much unlimited range, man. If he comes across and people are back and he's 10 feet behind the line, he's got to start hunting those down. And if they start pressing out on him, then he goes around them and lays it in on them. So he's evolved really nicely into that. I think it was a process though of kind of changing over the whole style of the offense. Bringing a little bit more analytics to it. Higher volume of threes, assisted buckets, things like that we were striving for, and he's really, he's adapted to it great, and he fits it perfectly. He's a true analytical dream, really, on the offensive end.
And it obviously all begins, at that, at the defensive end of the floor. If you think back to the championship and you think about how you have played this season. But I want to take you back to Game 6 of the NBA Finals. And here you are on the road. And if there was ever a moment that you think about, for me, and you think Kyle Lowry, biggest stage, the way he started Game 6, I thought said so much about all the things that you just talked about within him, that he was not going to allow this to get back to a Game 7. He was on an opposing floor. You look at his home and road splits, and he loves the road, man. He loves that crowd being on him. Yeah. He fuels and feeds off of that. And I thought that was just a really significant moment within his career, that he started that Game 6 the way he did for his team.
Yeah, I tell you what, Maddie, I think he came out and got our first 11. I sensed a good start for him. I don't know if I sensed the first 11. There are not too many guys do that in a closing game of the finals. But I sensed he was really ready. Exactly what you said. He didn't want that thing going back to Game 7. He was ready to let it all hang out in Game 6. I think he ended up 24, 25 points, something like that, and was unbelievable. He was chasing those guys around Thompson while he was in there, and Curry, and he was really incredible. And then late in the game, he got the ball where it needed to go. You know, he made some kickouts to Fred. He hit Pascal on some rolls. He made some great decisions passing the ball as well. But you're right. It was I talked to him the other day about it. He said, without a doubt, his best game of his career, you know, considering the stage.
It doesn't get any brighter. And then when the clock finally ticked to 0, now we've had the opportunity to go back and watch Game 6. And, I mean, even now I'm on the edge of my seat how agonizing and how long it took. But when it finally did and the celebration begins, Kyle ends up being the first on stage to raise that Larry O'Brien, the Larry O.B., and poignant when you think about this organization, the success he's had, that he's the one that lifts that trophy, yes?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I want to comment of how composed I thought both you and Jack were down the stretch on the broadcast. It was the first time the other day was the first time I watched, and I was like, these guys are really acting like this is another day in the park here, man. But anyway, yeah, for sure. Kyle
inside, by the way, inside, Nick, we were going nuts.
You guys weren't showing it. You guys were like me. I was sitting there glued to my seat, trying to not come out of my skin. But yeah, I mean, cornerstone of the franchise, Matty. And I think the 6-year trek, you know, the years he put in to turn the franchise around, get it in the playoffs, advance here and there, and then to finally be able to get to that crowning moment. Yeah, I think that felt pretty good for him to lift that Larry O'Brien trophy in the air.
When you think about having a player like Kyle on your team and how hard he is and his compete level, what does that do for the group as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly is one of the big factors that we win so consistently in the regular season, Matty. I think, you know, the one thing that you can say about the Raptors is on a nightly basis, pretty much, you know, we play really hard. And I think a lot of that stems from Kyle's just demeanor, attitude, and then he goes out there and does it by example. You know, it's really when you're one of your best players or your best player or certainly your leaders out there, you know, throwing his body around and getting up and guarding people and challenging shots and blocking out guys who are 6'10" to 260 pounds. And you got to do it too. And I think that really feeds to the guys on the floor. And I think the guys on the bench see it too. So when they enter the game, you know, they're ready to go too.
I know everybody is trying to, from a player perspective, stay in shape. I know you've watched a ton of film and had a lot of meetings with your coaches. How has this time been for everyone as you prepare for hopefully the return of the NBA season?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, Matty. I think that the hardest part, I think, is there's just no sense of urgency. You know what I mean? And that's hard to really, you know, get your mind in a focus level of, you know, when you got a game coming up, you gotta study and you gotta it's gotta sink in, and you gotta make some decisions while you're watching, and now you can kind of cruise through things a little bit, but we'll be okay. I think the players we touch base with them every day. They're all healthy, which is the main thing. They're all doing their best to stay in shape. Let's pray, man. Let's pray for world health, and let's pray we can all get back to doing some other things, and that's hope basketball is one of them.
There's no question about that. Thank you so much. Best to your family, and hopefully we get through this all okay. Everyone out there, please be safe. Thanks, Nick. Thanks
a lot, man. Good talking to you as always.
So a lot of great stuff there from Nick Nurse and Matt Devlin on Kyle Lowry and his time with the Raptors and their interactions together. But before we kind of dive into that conversation, I want to go back to what Alvin was talking about kind of like point guard battles and competition in the NBA. And it's prevalent no matter if it's newsworthy or not. And, you know, Kyle had a lot of obstacles to overcome. Doug, what are your thoughts kind of on him having to overcome other competition, other point guards in different teams coming to Toronto, and even at the start of his tenure with Jose Calderon?
Well, I think he always thought he was the best guy on the team. That's what great athletes do. They always think, this is my team. I'm going to run it. I'm good. I'm better than that guy. But I think Kyle learned from guys that he was with, Conley, Dragic, and Alvin can speak to this much more better than I. In the Raptors, there is a bit of a pecking order, and you got to assert yourself. How long did it take you? Butch Carter buried you until Lenny Wilkins rescued you.
Yep.
So it's circumstances a lot of times, and the circumstances when Kyle first got to Toronto was it Jose's team. And Jose had run off everybody. No one could beat him out for that job. But when it came to it, that was Jose's job, and he wanted it. It was Jose's job, and Kyle wanted it too. And they were both sort of men enough that they figured it out, and it worked out pretty damn well, as it turned out, for everybody concerned.
And Alvin, what are some of those things that allow certain point guards to overcome those battles? And talking about, like, how did you overcome and how did you kind of assert yourself and become the man?
In my day growing up, the point guard is what? I mean, it's a number system. It's the one. You are the one. So it's not anyone else. You are the one. You're an extension of a coach. And the coach has to trust you. You guys have to be that quarterback of the team. So it was always a prestigious, position to have. And then you have someone like a Jose or like someone else, or if it was myself, it was guys that came in, whether it was Skip, whether it was Mike James, or there's people that came in. Coach Wilkins or other coaches, they trust me. And I think Dwayne Casey and whoever was there before Casey or whatever, Jay Triano, I think, I can't even remember now. Yeah, Jay Triano.
There's been a lot of them.
Yeah, Jose developed the trust. And once again, if I'm going to need somebody to lead my team, I need to trust that person. And Kyle just didn't develop that yet. Being a new guard, being someone with his reputation at that time, he had to develop trust. And that's what it boiled down to. Luckily now in today's game, you can have more than one point guard. It's not a one or a two. It's multiple positions. So it helps everyone out. But I think ultimately it's that point guard position that brings that feel of entitlement, that feel of leadership, that feel of it's about me to lead these guys. And that's what Kyle was thinking.
You talk about finding the right situation. You talk about hitting different levels as a player over your course of your career and striving to get to that ultimate goal, which is a championship. And you also made a great point about saying, the point guard is an extension of the coach. We just heard from Nick Nurse and Kyle Lowry in that one-on-one interview. And, Kyle Lowry had developed and experienced a level of success with Toronto leading up to that when Coach Nurse was an assistant. What kind of impact, specifically last year, leading to a championship, do you think that Nick Nurse had on Kyle, and how was he able to get the absolute best out of Kyle?
I think just their relationship prior. A lot of times the assistant coaches have the best relationships with the players because they work them out. When things aren't going well, they're sent to talk to by the head coach. They're sent to talk to the players and try to smooth and ease things over. You don't know how many times I was sent to Jarrett Jack's house during dinner time to just talk to this guy. But, those things happen. So you develop a relationship. You develop a trust. And once again, Kyle become more mature, I think that was another situation of perfect timing. But, Nick Nurse was somebody who got Kyle's trust. Nick Nurse, come to find out, man, I'm figuring out he's a basketball mind. He's a forward thinker on the basketball court. He's not afraid to make mistakes. He's not afraid to take chances. And I think Kyle respected that. But I also think the relationship prior to that, I think it helped out their relationship going forward as a head coach and a starting point guard.
Talk about maturity. Things that not on the court but off the court that allow somebody to grow, that helps both those situations. And one of them for any young man is fatherhood. And you see a lot of that and a lot of those behind the scenes and those interactions and the growth of players when they're dealing with their kids and they first have a child. And Randy, Open Gym is –
I don't have a child.
No, a different segue. With Open Gym, you guys are around for pretty much all these great, important moments. You can see in the episode, everywhere Kyle goes, he's bringing his two sons. Do you want to just talk about, seeing him in that fatherhood and in that kind of father role? And, his mom talks about raising him and acting as a mom and a dad and what maybe things he took from his mom as well.
Well, first of all, his mom's awesome. When Kyle went to Africa 2 years ago, his mom came and I got to talk with her a little bit. She's just hilarious, just the most supportive, loving, joyful person. So, and she talks in that episode, like she had to raise these two boys basically by herself. And we all have, families, and we all have probably seen situations where that happens, and that's not easy. Like, that is not easy. So kudos to her. She's a great woman. Kyle, I think she's passed on that sort of loving relationship to Kyle, because you see that with his kids when we're on the road. And I'm lucky enough to go to the All-Star games, and Kyle's been there every year for the last 5-6 years, whatever it is. And he brings his kids every time. The last All-Star game I went to, I said, do they like it? And he goes, they love it. They love everything about being here. So he knows what they like, and he provides for them. So it's really cool to see, they ride the car with him to when he's just going to, go to practice, or they're hanging out with him in the lobby, or he just brings them everywhere. And I think that's like, it's not the way I grew up, but it looks like a pretty cool way to grow up if I'm Kyle's kids, And
I think the one thing that's sort of interesting, it goes to the growth of Kyle and the franchise, is that it all happened to the key guys at the same time. Kyle had the two sons. DeMar had his two daughters. I think Amir had a kid around that same time. Casey's children are with his wife are very, very young. And that, I think, led to a lot of the maturity in the organization and the group, is that they all became parents and had common tugs away from the game. And I think that allowed them to sort of grow together and become men, as opposed to just very skilled boys playing a game. And I think that was the genesis of the team getting to the championship level.
Randy, was there like a specific open gym shoot or episode, behind the scenes with Kyle that like stands out for you that was captured, that really like hits home and showed a lot of that maturity and just showed kind of Kyle and as a person?
Well, the Thanksgiving stuff that he does, where he brings his family and serves meals to those that are less fortunate, that always has stood out. And especially the last one, because he includes his kids not to a point where they're just tagging along. He puts them to work, right?
Yeah.
Like those kids are behind, they're serving things, and they're enjoying it, and they're seeing how a lot of people live, and they're recognizing that the way they are living is not, common. And I think that is a really important lesson, to put on your kids when you have that situation that some professional athletes have. It's not this normal way of living financially, I would say. And it's hard to make kids to raise kids in that environment to be these great, loving, caring, want to help the world type people, which is what I think we all strive for. And those of us that have kids, and I think he's doing that, and it's a hard thing to do. And him and his wife Ayana are doing that exceptionally well. The kids are enjoying being a part of those things. They love helping out. I think they're old enough to recognize what they're doing, and so that really is cool. And just the holiday assist too, when he's at he's getting gifts for all the kids.
Yep.
The kids are grabbing gifts for other kids too. They're being a part of it on that end as well. So I think that part of it has been really eye-opening and really nice to see.
It certainly added to kind of Kyle's legacy, because it adds a different dimension to it. Another great open gym moment as it relates to Kyle, historically, was his Villanova jersey retirement, which was something special. And I mean, listen, Alvin, Philly native, Nova alum, like seeing that episode and seeing Kyle go back to Villanova and him being honored in that way, kind of being almost like an older brother to him and close friend. How does that make you feel?
It was great. I knew the hard work that he puts into being a good person. I think when you get accolades and you get certain accomplishments, for me, and this is just me, and I think the people have been around me, I think all of those things don't matter if you're the good basketball player, if you're not a good person. And what you guys and what Randy touched on, talked about greatly, is the person that Kyle is, right? And I think if he was the person that we saw him as before or other people from outside. So he wouldn't get the retirement jerseys. He wouldn't get the all-star bids. He wouldn't get the benefit of the doubt a lot of times, like, coming into certain games and stuff like that. So it's just another aspect of him developing, him maturing, and him showing everyone who he is. Because just like Randy said, those kids are at Villanova as well. Those kids are everywhere. And, I think it was a great moment. And I know it meant a lot for Kyle, because those are the best times when you can, honor someone when they're still around, right? And Kyle can witness it. He can be a part of it. His kids can see it. So it was a great moment. I wish I was there. I was actually at the Red Party. Is it the Red Party still? Whatever, the Raptors wrap-up party, whatever. I was at that party.
I think the Red Party, they don't invite us anymore, pal.
Yeah, you're right.
Up City Social.
The social, man. I was there. I missed that one, but I missed Kyle's, his night. But it was a proud moment for me, and I know it was for Kyle as well.
And Alvin, you guys worked out in the summers. You kept in constant communication. Rewinding back to last season's playoff run, were there any specific conversations that you guys had in that playoff run, like in those clutch moments, or even just after the championship?
Not really, man. We had sometimes we had dinner in San Francisco during the championship. And that's pretty much it. I would see him and we would talk here and there, but not much, man. It was more like I've learned that Kyle, when he want to talk during that time, he'll call me or he'll text me. Like when he's having a game or a struggle, a game, whatever, he'll just text and like, oh, head, like, what's up? And then it's like he wants to talk about something. But, last year he was cool, calm. He was so confident and he was at ease and at peace. I just saw a different element of him during that time. But that's Kyle. When the stakes are high, since he was a kid, he always played well. No matter if it was a top high school player at that time, I think it was Sebastian Telfair or something. He always stepped up to the plate, no matter who he played, and that was always him. So, I wasn't expecting anything less.
And anyone can chime in on this one, but all that leading up to the footage of teammates and Masai telling Kyle to kind of lift the championship trophy for them all and for the Toronto Raptor fan base and for all of Canada. Why do you think that moment was so special for Kyle Lowry to experience?
I think basically because he was the guy. He had lived through the hell of all the players still there. Now, there's players from Alvin's era who lived through much more atrocious times than that. But he was the constant. He sort of outlasted DeMar. He outlasted Bosch. He outlasted coaches. He was the guy who had grown it from nothing. They were 20. They were what? 22 wins, 30 wins. DeMar's first year, 20. They were awful. Yeah. And he was the guy that sort of was the constant in the constant growth of the team. All those years where they won more games than they did the year before, he was the guy. And it was rightfully his moment. And I get Kawhi, and I get Nick, and I get Masai, and I get all the other storylines. But that was a Kyle Lowry championship because all the stuff he had done with and for the organization to get it to that point.
Well, and then if you look at sort of how his ascension of playoff performances happened too, there was a lot of talk, Doug and guys, just about how he wasn't a performer in the playoffs and he wasn't a leader and he wasn't a winner. And I just, thought that's so inconsiderate of understanding what it takes to get to the level he's at right now or was at before he even won a championship. You have to be a leader of some sort. You have to be a winner of some sort to be 6 feet, 6'1", and get to that level. So all this talk that he can't win or he can't do, do you know how hard it is to get a scholarship at Villanova? You know how hard it is to get drafted to the NBA? To play at a level where you're making shots in the playoffs and winning games and playing hard in a sometimes in a league where you're getting paid a lot to maybe just mail it in occasionally. Kyle does not do that. So all that sort of talk about, he can't win or he can't lead, finally that got shut up, and it wasn't, I don't think a championship was needed to shut that up because I think that it's difficult to play in the NBA already. But, it was just a great culmination, I think, for him and to just, quiet sort of the crowd a little bit.
Yeah, and Doug, you kind of mentioned him being the face and the figurehead of getting Toronto Raptors basketball across that line, and even bigger than that, you covering Canadian sports through all these years, and where do you think that what he did with the Toronto Raptors organization and them as a team, where do you think that they're now placed in the history of Canadian sports moments?
Oh, I think it would be right up there with the greatest of them all. Besides the Canadian moments like Olympic championships or world championships, in North American professional team sports, it would be the best one in, I'm going to say, 40 years, 50 years, especially for Toronto and for the country, because and I understand the era is different. The social media is different. The media is different. The interest in players and what they do is a little bit different. But the Raptors really are this Canadian thing. And it doesn't exist in the hockey because there are so many teams. It doesn't exist in the baseball because baseball attracts an audience that isn't reflective of Canada in the multiculturalism, multinationalism, multi-ethnic era with the way basketball does. As a Canadian sports moment, that championship run and seeing tens of thousands of people in Red Deer and Saskatoon and Mississauga and Halifax and Ottawa and Niagara Falls, that was a galvanizing moment for the country in sports. And I don't think we'll ever see it again. And I don't know how we would ever see it again. I think that 10-week run and those 2 weeks of the NBA Finals were moments that in Canadian sports history will never be paralleled.
And Alvin, being an American citizen, but coming to know and love Toronto in a different country and playing here, what was your perspective on that championship and what it means to Kyle and what it means to the country of Canada and the city of Toronto?
I mean, Doug hit right on it, right? I got a chance. I was fortunate enough to see the passion of the city. I was fortunate enough to see the growth of the sport in the city and the country. And just for it to, reach the top of the hill with a championship that you always wondered as a player, I always wondered what it would be like. I only got to the second round and I saw the energy and I saw the excitement and the support. And I always wondered, damn, what would it be like to win a championship? I used to always think about the Blue Jays and their parade. Where would our parade be? And those are things you envisioned or you couldn't envision, but you dreamt about, and then it actually happened. So, I remember when he first got traded to Toronto, he came over my house and was like, it's a done deal, this, that. And I was like, yo, if you win in Toronto, man, they're going to love you forever. Like, it's just something that you're going to submit. And now, from that standpoint, I wasn't even thinking about a championship. I was just thinking about winning and having good seasons because that's what the Raptors had up until that point. But it's something that's special, man. It's special. It got me a little emotional, and I've never been emotional as a player from wins and losses or whatever, but it was a great feeling, and it was great to be a part of, and I was honored to be a part of it, but also I felt really good for Kyle to be a part of it in that capacity and for everyone else as well.
Well, you see Masai in the episode speaking on Kyle Lowry being the heart and soul of the Toronto Raptors, and I think that that's something we can all agree on. It was fun sitting here eulogizing about his time in Toronto and the path that led to an NBA championship. And, if it weren't for this isolated break that we don't know when it's going to end, I'm sure that there's still more to come from Kyle and with his time with the Toronto Raptors. Listen, I just want to thank everyone for their time here. Doug, thank you for all those stories and the insight you provided. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's nice to have my guy Alvin here to back me up because I know a few things.
Absolutely.
You know everything.
And Randy, of course.
Doug, when I first started watching sports, I didn't have cable, so I was listening to it on the radio. We did also get this Toronto Star every morning. So my whole thing every morning was make a trip down. I lived on a farm, so the driveway was like a kilometer. I had to go down to the driveway, pick up that Toronto Star and read your articles just to figure out, a little bit of analysis of what happened the night before, other than just what I heard on the radio. So
Alvin had 20 and 10 because he knew to throw the ball to Vince Carter and get the hell out of the way.
That's simple, simplistic.
Hey, I know we won the championship last year, but those were the glory days in my mind.
We had some fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Randy, thanks so much for joining us and giving fans the kind of behind the scenes stories about all the great access that Open Gym provides our fan base. We appreciate it.
Well, appreciate it. It starts from the top. We get the go ahead from Masai and the management and Bobby, and then it trickles down and the players buy in. It makes our job a lot easier, that's for sure. And then, of course, having guys like Al and Doug on the show make the show, in my opinion. So
absolutely. And lastly, Alvin, listen, you're a Toronto Raptors legend. And the time that we talked about the Toronto Raptors' previous success and giving fans that taste of success, you were a huge part of it. And I remember, like Randy said, reminiscing back to when I was a kid with my family watching the Raptors in that playoff run and watching you play and represent Toronto the way you did. This is a real pleasure for myself, for sure. And we thank you for joining us and giving such great insight about, Kyle and your time with the Toronto Raptors. We appreciate it.
And thanks for having me. Always thanks for the love. And Doug, also for everyone, those guys, the Kyle Lowrys, the DeMar DeRozans, the Kawhi Leonards, the Vince Carters, myself, we were lucky to have someone like Doug, supporting us, writing about us, covering us, fair, honest, and just a true person. And a lot of times from the media side, you don't see that. And growing up now, being on the media side a little bit, Doug, I tip my hat to you. You're part of the Raptors and the history, just as a Kyle Lowry, just like a Masai, anybody else, man. That's real talk. And I definitely appreciate all the love and support you've given me throughout the years and still to today. So thanks for having me on with the legend himself, Randy, yourself. So I really appreciate it.
Man, you just made my day. Alvin Williams just called me a legend, or was he talking to Doug?
No. I was talking
all
to
legends
Doug.
in their own mind, man. That's all right.
Doug, but we are legends.
Hey, but you did say I covered something greatly, so I appreciate that.
Oh, you do, man. And it's lucky, man. You being in, me getting a chance to see you guys and stuff, man, and you being in the household and you're being on the road. And I love when you guys come out with the mic, and I've done some interviews. You do a great job, man. And you're right. You're the right person to be around the team, to be in intimate settings. Trustworthy, you handle yourself well, man. True professional, man. So
appreciate that, man.
I'm just going to say this because we're in this big love-in thing right now, but this is absolute truth. For 25 years now, I've been trying to tell people what athletes and what basketball players are like.
Mm-hmm.
Open Gym shows them.
Yeah,
and that's legit. And I think I know the era is different than it was when we started this thing, but that access and making these men like humans is hugely important to telling their story and letting people realize what's real. And I think we try to write those stories, but you can't do it unless you got the behind-the-scenes stuff and bring it out fairly and accurately. And I think that's what Open Gym does. And I tell you, people around the league swear by it because of the look it gives into the people who are the athletes. Well, shout out Jeff Landicho and Jeff Rocky for starting that baby.
Absolutely. What a perfect note to end on. Thanks, everyone on the panel. Thanks to all the viewers out there watching. Everyone stay home, stay safe. I'm sure we'll have much more of these great conversations down the line. See you guys for now.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Alvin, you want to play one-on-one?
Sure.